much for joining us. If you've not been a part of the Jivamaya Yoga Wisdom Talks before, these are just a lovely short 30 minutes of wisdom. And this month we're talking about food. We started off last week with Amadea Morningstar, which was such a pleasure and such an honor. And we have the same pleasure and honor today to welcome Kerry Clasby. Kerry has single-handedly raised the bar in Las Vegas way back in 2008 for farmers markets, and everybody sort of scattered to try and keep up with her, which was pretty much impossible, because she offers just such an amazing market, just really amazing. So Kerry calls herself an intuitive forager. So I'm going to ask the very first question today, Kerry, as we welcome you, is what is an intuitive forager and how did you get into this? Tell us a little bit before we come into the actual questions about food.
Well, I was brought up in Boston, and my husband and I moved out here when my little ones were 3 and a newborn. And when my newborn turned about 18 months, his dad took him and his brother to Jack in the Box, and they got this E. coli infection, which was very unusual at the time. My suspicion is it was happening, but they didn't have the testing mechanisms like they do now. And my toddler was failing to thrive, and it turned out that he had a protozoa that is from the greens and strawberries in the Mexican food supply because of the defecating in the fields. And so I was immediately taken back that how strict I needed to be about organic. And so I started growing my own, and I started really researching who was doing what with my food, because when you see a little toddler failing to thrive, you realize how crucial it is to know what's happening with the food. So that was the beginning. And then I went to Waldorf teacher training, and they one of the years, the third grade, is the year of the farming module, and I began to do a farming module with locally, and I went to Waldorf teacher training, and so I started doing biodynamic composting. So that was the beginning of me, and I was out at a farm one day. I began selling to the chefs because I was at farmers markets after I had a bumper crop of heirloom tomatoes. And one of the chefs, one of the farmers said they had all of this rose scented geranium, and would I take it? And I was like, well, nobody buys rose scented geranium, but I knew he really wanted me to just try. So I brought it into my truck, and I was down in Dana Point, and Chef Michael Mina looked at me and he said, do you have any rose scented geranium? And I realized the coincidence of that couldn't, it was more of a serendipity or a synchronicity. And so I was a forager, and I realized I was using intuition as my spiritual path. And so the intuitive forager name was born from a chef who said that was intuitive. And so that's how it began.
Wow.
Using intuition to find the best. I think the intuition is also very powerful because there were many farmers that, not many, but a few select farmers who called themselves organic, but I was not intuitively led towards their farm or their product. And I would find out later on that they were cheating or they weren't real. And so I saw so many times how intuition protects us and how important it is to tap into that wordless knowing.
So before we explore that a little bit more, because I'm really interested in your willingness to share what it is that we ask when we come to a farmer's market, because it might be interesting for those listening that the first farmer's market was about 5,000 years ago on the Nile, when the boats would go up and down the Nile to bring food to the people on the banks of the Nile.
Amazing.
And then here in the United States, the first farmers market was in 1634. So they're not necessarily that new. However, they did go through some bumps due to a lot of Political hearsay, political laws, etc., that sort of came over the pike over the course of the years. But then there
And
was about
regulations too.
exactly,
Regulations.
exactly. And then about 5 years ago or so, a renaissance really, I mean, 20 years ago, a renaissance really began in both New York and in California. And I remember going to Union Square in New York City religiously on Fridays to buy food.
Me too.
Um, it was really, yeah, a concern over the preservation of the local farmer and very much concerned over the smaller farmer and the welfare of the smaller farmer. But before we really talk about farmers markets, let's go back a little bit and talk about the land and why is it so important for us to be able to eat straight from the land, to eat food that has been harvested, eat food that has been, when I say properly farmed, that's probably the wrong terminology. You can correct me on that. But farming has a lot to do, has more to do with just the food that it produces. It also has to do with the whole ecological system and the whole makeup of the soil and keeping the soil healthy. So can you speak to all of that?
Well, at the end of the day, human beings, like all creatures on Earth, are electrical magnetic beings. That is that the tree has its roots in the magnetic pole of the Earth, and it has its leaves right up to the sun all the time. So it gets its food from the sun and it discharges out through the root system. So we are the same thing. We are supposed to take food that will bring us photosynthesis, basically. And in order to have the most efficient energy that'll support our immune system, we need to have we need to eliminate interference fields. Interference fields include heavy metals, parasites, um, uh, pesticides, herbicides, substances that we really don't we can't do anything with. For example, they find aluminum in the brains of Alzheimer's patients that because the body doesn't know what to do with aluminum, so it stores it places, then that becomes an interference field, either a precursor to cancers or inflammatory, inflammatory cardiovascular disease. All of these interference fields interfere with our prana or with our energy. And so it's very important that we get the produce as close to living as possible. The moment you cut the produce, remember this plant has gone through photosynthesis and has captured sunlight and turned it into energy. And then we eat it, and that's what it supports within us. It's a magical miracle, really. And so when you're eating strawberry, for example, the problem with these interference fields like pesticides and artificial fertilizers that are filled with heavy metals is that they're invisible. So if I hand you a beautiful strawberry and I say, here, would you want this one or this one? They both look the same, but one of them has additions that are stressful to the body. So we want to make sure that we know what we're eating so that we eliminate that as much as possible to allow the body to deal with COVID, for example, or to deal with a flu, or to develop our immune system so we're fortified because we are meant to live here on this earth with ease. If you took a group of dolphins and they're in the ocean and they all got disease, you'd say, well, the water's polluted. You're not going to blame their DNA because dolphins were meant to swim in the ocean and disease free as we are. But that we have screwed up. So, the chemicals that are important to know about is what does a farmer do when you go up to a farmer's market and you see beautiful produce? One of the reasons it's so beautiful is because it's either got an incredible immune system for the plant on the farm, which is incredible soil, and the immune system of the farm, just like our blood and our immune system is akin to the soil, that we will protect ourselves from the bugs like parasites, from the viruses, from the protozoa. So when you go out into a field, you can get perfect produce, but sometimes it's because they have used chemicals to substitute for the natural ecosystem. So not all organic produce looks beautiful. Sometimes you get bug bites. Now, not always. Some organic farms have such a great immune system against certain aphids, for example, that they can grow Brussels sprouts that don't have bug bites. Highly unusual, but is has I have seen it. For example, the Brussels sprouts that we're buying are only organic, and they're much more expensive because it's much harder to. They do lose a lot more with an aphid infestation. So, what you want to say to your farmer is, how are you dealing with bugs? What is your system? Sometimes a pest management integrated, they call it IPS, an integrated pest management. There are beautiful ladybugs and wasps that'll eat the eggs of certain critters and creatures. And how are you dealing with the rodents? For example, gophers and ground squirrels and rabbits. We've got more rabbits than we have people around here. So, which is fine. Every morning I wake up and I see fields of rabbits and ground squirrels, and it's a beautiful thing because and butterflies are everywhere. And if we're quiet for a minute, maybe I'll we can when the cooler goes off, you can hear the many thousands of birds that are here. And there are, you know, mockingbirds and finches and sparrows and hawks and owls, and these are the benefits and the beneficials of having an all organic food supply and food system. And eventually, I believe that we won't have as many squirrels, we won't have as many rabbits because we just put up a beautiful owl house. And maybe we'll take a walk up there in a second. I can show you. The guys built this beautiful owl house sitting in the tree, which
How
will help
precious.
eliminate. It'll help encourage another family of owls. We already have two families of owls, and then we're going to do a raptor poll and see if we can get some of them to sit on top of it. See that owl house? It's beautiful. So the question to your farmer is, how do you deal with rodents? How do you deal with pests? And then what do you do for fertilizer? I mean, basically, all we really need is alfalfa or greens that have been decomposed with a good organic manure. And that can be horse manure and cow manure. And then why? Well, God has put these beautiful animals here because they have the stomachs to be able to break down the essentials of the grains. One of the reasons that we wreak havoc in our system by eating grains is because we only have one stomach. The cow has four stomachs, and all these chemicals that come in and break down the greens and even add back a beneficial bacteria to it. So when you're having your ghee or your milk or any of the dairy products, you will find that they are filled with probiotic benefits, and they have chemicals in them called butyrites. And these butyrites are like Pac-Man, and they gobble up free radicals, which are the invisible chemicals that we are interference fields that we bring in when we eat pesticide or artificial fertilizer coated fruits and vegetables. We need to deal with those free radicals that get created from the heavy metals and from the pesticides that are coming in. Remember, if you're eating food with pesticides, those pesticides are going into your tummy and killing your probiotics, your good bacteria. So those are the types of questions you want to ask. What do you do about weeds? How do you kill your weeds? Because another pernicious chemical that is prolific in our food supply, and it's extremely dangerous and it's extremely inflammatory, is called glyphosate, which is a chemical that has been made by Monsanto. And we have a woman in our local community in Las Vegas, Leslie Doyle, the tomato lady, who used to teach with it. And she had been diagnosed with lymphoma, and they know that it was a direct cause from the glyphosate, the Roundup that was being used to eliminate weeds. We like weeds. On my farm, weeds are the beneficials. They come in as the first responders and they bring all kinds of beneficial insects and nematodes into the soil and help keep the probiotics going. We are actually a no-till farm, which means that we don't turn it over and interrupt with those colonies of bacteria. We plant right into the old decaying matter because we know that we're putting our carbon back into the soil. So, what do you do about weeds? How do you eliminate weeds in the fields? How do you deal with the pests? And what do you do for fertilizer? And from those questions, a farmer that's doing it right will love to talk about. Like we have Lindy Omar, who's at our farmers market in Las Vegas, and they grow up in Moapa Meadow Valley Farm. If you ask her any of these questions, she loves sharing it with you because she knows that's the labor of. I mean, it's way more work, but it pays off in the end.
Yeah, you can tell that the food is just the taste
Can
is
you
quite
hear me okay?
amazing. Sorry. Yeah, we can hear you beautifully. We can hear you beautifully. So Kerry is when Kerry says here, she is talking from her farm in Malibu, which I have not yet had the pleasure of visiting, but I'm hoping to soon once COVID lets me out. and
Now I can't hear you right now. Can you? Is
I
there
can hear
something I'm
you.
doing wrong here?
Yeah,
Can you
can
hear me,
you? I can hear you.
Abby?
Yes.
Abby, I can't hear you.
Okay. Um, all right. I'm not quite sure what to do here. Let's see. Something.
All right, so I can't hear you. So let's see.
Let me type.
It says in stream. Um, do you want me to? Do you want to try to reconnect, or
Um, we can try and do that if you
maybe you can
want.
help me? I don't
Yeah,
see. For
no,
some reason, your volume went off on me.
yeah, that's interesting. I'm not quite sure why. We can try and reconnect. So, for those that are listening that can hear me, we're going to go off very quickly and come back on and hope that we
I
can
think I'm going to
reconnect.
try to reconnect with you. Shall I?
Yes. So, Carrie has lost the sound, so she's
Hear
coming
you.
back. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me
Can
now?
you hear me?
I can.
I cannot hear you.
All right.
Maybe maybe it's on your side.
So if I sign on,
You can text me. If you want to text me a question, I'll be glad to answer it. It doesn't. It seems to be. I mean, I reconnected, so it's the same as it was, but I can't hear you. I think the you're going to disconnect.
yes.
The important thing with the farmers market piece is obviously that we get the produce as close to being picked as possible because all your phytonutrients start to die. So the beauty of the farmers market and why the women in Cleveland, Ohio were so upset when electric cooling came on the scene, refrigeration is because you could never see how fresh something was now. And then that's why it's one of the greatest resources we have available to our immune system and to boosting our health.
So I've just texted Carrie to ask her if she'd like to give us a tour of the family of the farm. Let me show her my phone. And
Oh, I'll give you a little tour.
yeah, that would be great.
Let's take you in to see the farm and the farm stand. This is in Malibu. This has been a farm since 1954, organic farm. It was called the Malibu Fig Ranch, which is what I call it. And we are at Sterling Farms in Malibu at Point Doom, which is a beautiful, beautiful nature preserve where the whales come in. So I am going to pick up my computer and give you a quick little tour of our beautiful 16-acre farm. Here we have our fields. This is our pizza oven, and we do pizza from organic, not gluten-free, and organic um, dough twice a week. We have our stage up above, and there's our owl house off in the corner. Can you see it in the mixed in the trees? We're waiting for our family of owls to come by. I'm going to stand up on this picnic table and see if you can see the fields, how beautiful they are. And here's our farm stand. And we have a deck where we're building more. And we have picnic tables set up for everybody to be able to come and sit and talk. And we have most beautiful greens and herbs, and everything is fresh picked and organic raw dairy and butter. And it's great for social distancing because it's open air, and we put our masks on, and we have all the social distancing requirements. And we have probably 2,000 tomato plants, and we're all organic and we're biodynamic, which means that we make our own compost here and distribute it out of organic lactating dairy manure. But it's a beautiful gathering place and a beautiful place to be able to get. There's our farm cat, Jack. He thinks he's a dog. We haven't told him yet that he's not a dog. He's very friendly. He loves little children, which is a great feature to have when you're a farm cat. We have a place for also camping. We offer the ability for families to come and they can help on the farm. They can go to the beach. They can hike. And it overlooks a beautiful ravine. And it's an all organic farm that's been here since 1954. We lost all of the structures that in the Woolsey fire, except I saved the farm stand. I stayed on, and thank God we were able to save the farm stand. And then we were able to rebuild, and everything looks so great.
So I've just asked Kerry if there's anything that she would
Um,
like to add, and maybe
well,
talk a
you
little
know,
bit about
the
it.
plant-based diet, I'm a big proponent of plants and plant-based diet and sunlight. Um, the thing about us humans is that the yogis knew what science is now proving, that the sun salutation was there for a good reason. That when you get up in the early morning and you sun gaze or spend your time with your eyeballs allowing that infrared, the full spectrum sun to come in, you are actually stimulating the growth and production of all kinds of very important protective hormones: vitamin D, vitamin A, serotonin, dopamine, um, and melatonin. Actually, melatonin is stimulated at the beginning of the day through a chemical called melansporin, which is on our skin and our eyeballs. So we start the day with our sun salutation and get all the kinks out of our body by practicing our yoga and our meditation. And then you spend another hour or so, 20 minutes to an hour in the sun in the middle of the day. The actual early morning sun salutation is a preconditioning so to prevent you from skin cancer later on in the day. That it actually stops the any production of skin cancers from happening because of those protective chemicals. People who don't spend the early morning and then go into the sun don't have the vitamin D levels necessary to turn radiation into energy. Instead, it becomes radioactive. So, the plant based diet is the only diet that heals. And it is the diet that is at our essential foundation. When you're eating meat, you're eating the death. And when you're eating animal products, you're eating what the animal has broken down into their skin. So obviously, it's a secondary source. In the case of the butters, in the case of the yogurts, in the case of the milk, it's a little different because the animal has broken down for us, which is difficult. And in the cultured products, we find beneficials to us. But the plant-based diet is the one. The intensity, the nutrient density of herbs, the nutrient density of greens, it's so important that we incorporate those back into our diet and that we get back to the basics, because our body will thrive just like the dolphins. We're meant to live in this environment with ease. And that's why it's so great to be able to grow your own or know who's growing your food and eat intuitively. And one of the things that happens when you start eating greens and you start eating a plant-based diet is you stop craving the sugars and the carbs that are so destructive. But the reason we crave them is because they're instant energy. So we start eating a plant-based diet, we get a long-term reserve of sustainable energy, or prana. Other things about the importance of the chemical-free, nutrient-dense plant-based diet is we know that we have an immune system that will fight off everything in our environment. And we need to give our body the full support for that, because that's the answer to the elderly or the immune compromised. Get them back to basics so that when these pandemics occur, they have the immune system that's able to fight it. All right, so in 2 minutes we will be signing off, and I just want to say, Abby, you've been a gift and a treasure as a supportive farmers market from the beginning. You saw the magic of it and you knew the importance of it, and you brought that healing energy to our community, you and your husband Dick. And I've always been grateful for that connection or that relationship. And I've seen you in the trenches doing chair yoga with the elderly, and helping people with the Ayurvedic diet and encouraging people towards these unknown things that we need to bring back into our culture. And I'm grateful for that connection.
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure who can hear me. If you can hear me or not, I'm just not sure, because I don't know whose side this sound is a faulty thing. But if you can hear me, I just say thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next
Namaste.
week. Namaste. Thank you so much.
Namaste. Thank you.